to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So cute. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was very nice. All right. It's not often that we get to have a whole troop here, so that was exciting. All right, the first thing on our agenda is public comment. And I have two here. The first one, Adam McGovern.
Thank you. My name is Adam McGovern. I have a son at Gutierrez, and my other son who's here with the Boy Scouts. He just entered middle school at Kikamuit. I just wanted to quickly talk about my perspective of the transition between elementary school and middle school. And personally, I think it's a lot more than I would expected, and it's quite difficult. Maybe stating the obvious here, but they went from one teacher to now 6 teachers, more personalities, more expectations, and I think the workload has increased as well, which I think should be expected. I'm not here to criticize. I just wanted to see if there's an opportunity how we could strengthen the transition for the elementary students before they get to middle school. I believe that Colt Andrews might swap teachers in 5th grade, but I don't believe that any other elementary school does that. So could this be also an opportunity to take some best practices between elementary schools and maybe standardize them across? Shifting quickly from the student expectation to the parent expectation, I thought it was a lot understanding how Google Classroom works and really intensified for the middle school. Less concerned about myself and my wife, who's a public school teacher, but also maybe just for other parents who may not be as in tune to that technology, and perhaps they might be at a slight disadvantage. My son told me today that there's some YouTube channels that will show this. I was unaware. So maybe just an opportunity for a little more proactive communication when parents are coming to the middle school for 2 meetings we've had so far. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is the first year of a new plan at the middle school, and I would suggest that you sit with the superintendent and talk to her about what she's doing for those transitions. So I'm sure Superintendent Riley is available whenever you need to see her. Thanks. The next person on the agenda is our own Sheila Ellsworth.
It's kind of weird being on this side. I don't like it. So I just wanted to say a few words. As my term comes to an end, I have reflected on the past 4 years. It's been 4 years filled with significant changes and challenges. Changes and challenges with the district administration, challenges within the school committee, all while dealing with COVID and the lasting negative impact it has had on our students, teachers, parents, and our 2 communities. To say the past 4 years has been a challenge is quite an understatement. I would first like to thank our superintendent, Anna Riley. Thank you for your open and honest conversations. Honesty was not a common trait in this district. And you always take the time to explain your decisions. You always have open and honest dialogue, which I greatly appreciate. I appreciate your leadership and know that this district is in great hands and will move in the right direction. I would also like to thank Tony Ferrucci, our CFO. He has worked tirelessly to clean up our financials, and we have come so far because of it. We now have standardized financial reports that are posted every month and fiscal transparency that we've never had before. I know with your leadership and the leadership of our superintendent, administrators, and staff working together, our district will continue to improve. Thank you to each and every one of my colleagues. Through these difficult 4 years, each of you have taught me something about myself. I believe with every negative comment and action, you can always find the positive. I've learned so much about myself and unfortunately about politics. Like how important it is to have open and honest dialogue, especially with those who don't agree with your opinion and or your decisions. How naive I was to believe that this really is a nonpartisan committee. If we took politics out and focused on all of our students and go back to the academic basics, every one of our students would achieve their academic success. Each and every one of us are leaders in this district and have created the culture that you see right now. My wish for the future of the committee: always put all of our students first. Ask our teachers, staff, and parents and community members for feedback and work collaboratively. Have open and honest dialogue, especially with those who have different opinions. You may learn something from each other if you really listen. Don't just resort to name calling. That does not solve anything and does not demonstrate good leadership and puts a negative spin and light on our district. Keep executive sessions confidential. Discussing what others have said in a confidential setting undermines the district's integrity and will not help our district succeed. Put your differences aside and always work together. All of our students, our district, and our two communities deserve it. Always remember, trust is easy to lose, difficult to gain, and actions speak louder than words. It has been an honor to serve on behalf of the town of Bristol. I wish you all the best of luck and nothing but the best for the future of this district. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I need a motion to,
So moved.
and I need a second. Do we have any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. The next thing on the agenda is a presentation on MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. Pretty soon we're going to run out, we're actually going to run out of letters that we can stream together.
Never has a long alphabet. We'll have plenty of letters. Thank you. We're excited to have Dr. DiBiase here to share with you where the district currently is in terms of our multi-tiered system of support.
Oh,
The work that's already gone on, what's planned for the rest.
did you want to announce the person we hired, or do you just want to keep going?
Oh, that's fine. We can do that. I'm sorry. So we
I did
have
too. I
hired-
got poked over here.
Okay. After many, many, many months of advertising, we have finally, in our consent agenda, just appointed an accounting manager. So we have hired Ms. Georgiana Murphy, who comes to us with lots of experience in both our IB system and in accounting from her work in Portsmouth for the last, I want to say 20 years, 22 years, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. And so again, Dr. DiBiase, if you can introduce our plan for multi-tiered systems of support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So this evening, we are going to take a deep look at what multi-tiered systems of support, otherwise known as MTSS, is, why we need it, where our current areas of focus are, and then where we are going to be headed. So multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, is a framework that helps educators identify students' academic, behavioral, and social emotional strengths and challenges, and provide differentiated support for students depending on their needs. In short, MTSS ensures all students get what they need when they need it in real time. If we look at the why, which is always really important, why is it? Why do we need MTSS in the district? In order to make sure that all students get what they need when they need it, to understand what every student needs. This ensures that students are not slipping through the cracks, and ultimately, all students benefit with an improved education. So the benefits of MTSS. First, there is a growing need to bring the whole child lens, as we know, to our classrooms and provide both academic, social, emotional, and behavioral supports to all students, especially given the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In a coherent system, what we have found is that MTSS tends to be confusing to many, and there are many different understandings of what MTSS is. MTSS is not a single response or an intervention program like RTI or PBIS. It is a system that includes those components like RTI, interventions and responses, among other elements. It's not only for students that are at risk, it is for all students and takes into account academic, non-academic supports, including social, emotional, behavioral, and even attendance. If you refer to the graphic, let's see if my pointer works here. Yeah, a little bit. Well, so I really liked this graphic, which is not mine, by the way, because it really incorporates what we know as RTI of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, but also includes social, emotional, behavioral, and academics, all incorporated and overlapping into one. MTSS can be a very clear, straightforward system, and our schools already incorporate components of MTSS, such as the use of academic tiering. MTSS, however, also includes regular progress monitoring support for behavior concerns, social emotional wellness, attendance monitoring, and family and community engagement. In the social emotional and behavioral supports, this is where we're seeing a lack of supports in our schools. In the absence of a coherent system, the result is having silos of information that are not integrated to provide the whole picture of where our students are at. For example, we know social or emotional challenges can impact academics and vice versa. So in order to have a clear, cohesive, and coherent system, we need a common understanding and consistent language. In addition, MTSS necessitates teacher training and a genuine evaluation of school culture, as well as clearly defined practices. With all these things are implemented with fidelity, then all students will benefit. There are 4 essential components of MTSS: screening, multi-level prevention system, progress monitoring, and data-based decision-making. MTSS is a proactive and preventative framework, and it integrates data and instruction to maximize student achievement and support students' social, emotional, and behavioral needs from a strength-based perspective. It offers a framework for all educators to engage in data-based decision-making related to program improvement, high-quality instruction and intervention, social emotional learning, positive behavioral supports, and academics necessary to ensure positive outcomes for districts, schools, teachers, and students. So if we look at our current focus areas in structures and systems, as I spoke about earlier, in order to have a clear, coherent, and cohesive system, we need to have a shared understanding of what MTSS is. To begin this work, we have a 3-hour training with our district and school administrators on October 26th. And from there, we'll establish an MTSS district advisory team as well as school-based teams. In order to build capacity and ownership, these teams will examine what processes we already have in place, where gaps exist, and collaboratively develop and implement a systematic framework. Part of this work will be to develop an MTSS handbook to ensure consistency across schools with standard protocols and procedures. We'll also take a close look at the master schedules in each of our schools to ensure that there's time and staffing to provide interventions and enrichment. When we examine Tier 1, all students receive systematic, scientific, research-based core instruction that's implemented with integrity and emphasizing grade-level standards. With a continued focus on strengthening core instruction, the district is conducting classroom walkthroughs. In addition, all administrators are also participating in professional development on conducting instructional rounds. At Tier 2, students identified as being at risk academically receive additional supports and interventions in addition to the core. And at Tier 3, students who have not demonstrated progress with targeted group interventions at a Tier 2 support level require more time in more intensive interventions. Continued professional learning is needed for implementing interventions and using intervention acceleration time effectively. When we look at social emotional learning and behavioral expectations at the Tier 1, which is our core instruction level, we'll be looking at enhanced use of responsive classroom, which has been initially trained at the elementary schools, I believe about 6 or 7 years ago. We're looking to reinforce and enhance the use of the responsive classroom approaches, as well as stated earlier, we know that there is a need for clear, consistent, and coherent Tier 1 social, emotional, and school-wide behavior expectations. As a district, we've decided to address our students' social emotional learning by piloting Second Step Elementary and Middle School, a research-based SEL program. As we know, social emotional learning helps people understand and manage their emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. The program launched at KMS this past Friday and will launch at all the elementary schools the week of October 23rd. The program has 4 units that are consistent across grade levels. The concepts addressed in each unit are based on what's appropriate for students' development at each grade and aligned to the Rhode Island SEL standards. Teachers in all the schools through K-8 in the elementary and middle schools have received professional development on the program, including resources, best practices to maximize the benefits for our students. Family engagement is also really encouraged to reinforce the skills students are learning. Communication will be sent home weekly in principals' newsletters with information on what their child is learning and how they can reinforce it at home. Also part of Tier 1, we are piloting SABRS, a universal, SABRS stands for, here's another one, Social, Academic, Emotional, and Behavioral Risk Screener. We are currently planning logistics for initial staff training. For this year, we will be piloting it in certain grades to facilitate a gradual implementation. As we look at SEL and behavior for Tiers 2 and 3, this is another major area of need, and it's identifying and compiling SEL and behavioral evidence-based strategies for an intervention toolkit. This will be part of the MTSS advisory team's work. We're also continuing to develop our specialized programs for SEL and behavior at Gutierrez and at KMS. And as we know, program evaluation is necessary to assess the effectiveness of various programs and processes. This work will inform what is going well, changes needed, and overall success of the various programs and processes. But in order to continue to build capacity, ownership, and effective systems that will be sustained over time, ongoing professional learning is key for our leadership teams and our staff. As stated earlier, our administrators have training in a few weeks. I'm also meeting regularly with principals in the elementary and middle school. And I'd like to just take a minute to stress the importance again of professional development time. I know last year we had about 7 PD days during the school year, and this year we have only 4. And we are finding it very difficult to provide necessary training for our teachers, and it's a critical component. Circling back to the benefits of MTSS, our goal is to build a strong framework with a solid foundation that is going to be sustainable over time. As we do wrap up, I want to take a minute to celebrate the great things happening in our schools. As I said earlier, there are strong components of MTSS happening throughout our schools. I've had the pleasure of working with each school's teachers and administrators, and their dedication and unwavering support for our students is second to none. And I also wanted to just mention that in your packet, there is a general timeline of the design and implementation of MTSS that includes the structures and systems, as well as the Tier 1 social emotional learning, and Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 social emotional learning and behavioral expectations piece. So these timelines represent our best thinking at this time. We're still early in the year and have a lot of processing to do, but it gives everyone a general idea of where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody here have any questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. DiBiase. I've been so excited to sort of see how this is going to take shape.
Me too.
I was hoping I might be able to put you on the spot with a couple of questions.
Sure.
Thank you. We spoke a little bit, or you presented a little bit earlier, talking about how important it is to evaluate how productive and or well this program is working. Could you speak a little bit more about what that might look like as we're moving forward?
Absolutely. So first of all, it's really important to get feedback from boots on the ground from our teachers who are implementing the program. A big part of the program is not only, for example, in the elementary schools, the teachers will be facilitating a lesson once a week during morning meeting. If that lesson is given once a week during morning meeting and nothing else happens, it's not going to have a great impact. The idea and a lot of the professional learning we've been doing and talking about is really around how are you enforcing and applying those skills and concepts that you're teaching in that one lesson throughout the course of the school day, as well as within, to the families at home and how they are reinforcing those as well. With that holistic approach, it has the biggest impact. We will be scheduling a mid-year check-in with all faculties, as well as an end-of-year check-in where we'll be doing some surveys, feedback, what is going well, what is not going well. And we will also look at the SABRS screener, which we'll be giving at the mid-year and then again at the end of year to evaluate how that's going. And then we'll look at some more general data like attendance, survey works, climate and culture, and so on. So,
Great. Thank you very much. I see how that
Carly?
necessitates a lot of PD. Thank
Carly, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
It's really hard to hear you. Can you speak into one of the microphones? Thanks.
No problem. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for explaining that. If I have another question, unless I
No,
want to give
it's
some other folks opportunity if they have other questions.
when you're talking about sustainability of the program too, I was hoping for a little more information about what that will look like as well.
So when I speak about sustainability, if you have a strong framework that is in place and has ownership and buy-in from all stakeholders, along with that, you have structures and procedures and processes that are in place. It should run itself. And just as we look at our school improvement teams, and they are constantly looking at that continuous improvement and how we can improve, similarly, if a system is in place that is working and has been, I use the word automaticity, in each school, that system should be able to be sustained over time while also looking at that continuous improvement piece.
Wonderful.
Does that
Thank
make
you.
sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So I thank you very much
You're welcome.
for that presentation. So I have two questions. You talked about the elementary level, that they would be having a weekly meeting in there once a week. What about at the KMS level? Which class will this be instructed through?
It'll be done through advisory, which happens once in their 7-day rotation. It's a 30-minute advisory, and this will actually serve as each week's advisory lesson.
And then my second question was, you spoke about the screening that will take place mid-year and then end of year. Will that be for all students in those advisory or in those elementary levels?
Actually, we are piloting the screener in grades, if I don't have the slide in front of me, I believe it's grades K to 2, grades 6, 8, and 9, I believe. Is that correct?
5, 8, and 9 is written.
5, 8, and 9.
If I could just touch base, that is the screener, both an academic and a social emotional screener, is required by ESSER 3. It's required by ESSER 3. As a contingency upon receiving those funds, you have to implement both an academic screener and a social emotional screener. So SABRS is the tool that we've identified and been working towards implementing. We already had an academic screener. I'm sure, being a parent, you have seen iReady. iReady is our academic screener, and we use that K through the high school. But we did not have a social emotional screener in place. So last year we spent some time investigating them. Actually, Dr. Toland went through and did a lot of that work. And then when Dr. DiBiase came on board, she picked up that mantle and has been working with Dr. Caldwell on the SABRS work, which is that social emotional screener.
Thank you.
I have a question. What you do in those 30 minutes, are teachers and or other members of the unit in the school encouraged to use that in their classroom? Or is that just a one-shot deal?
No, they are absolutely encouraged. In fact, I'm a big fan of the program because it is really all-inclusive. You can actually go online and explore it yourself at secondstep.org as well if you wanted some more information, and I can certainly provide as much information as you want. At the elementary level, they actually provide ideas and strategies on how to incorporate the skills for each week's lessons throughout the rest of the week and throughout the school day. The remainder of this, they also have unit overview videos that are about 5 to 7 minutes for all other staff members, paraprofessionals who can view that, and we expect them to take that time and view those so that they can also help to reinforce all of those skills and concepts throughout the course of the school day, and also provide feedback, coaching. For example, Deb, I really like how you problem solve that conflict in the playground today. And then model it myself and how I'm feeling. I was feeling really anxious, but I took a few deep breaths and now I'm feeling more calm. And so as those skills are being taught, the idea is for us to be modeling coaching, reinforcing throughout the course of the school day in everyday activities, no matter whether you're learning a math problem or whether you're playing outside in the playground.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah,
You're
Nikki,
welcome.
go ahead.
I have two questions and a comment. The first question is, I presume that there are case studies for districts that have been doing this for longer, that you've had the opportunity to visit. I would love to hear a little bit about what that looks like, and any sort of, I mean, I presume you've based this on all of that research, but I would just be interested in hearing about any case study of districts that have this in place and what the timeline looks like.
There have actually been several studies, meta-analyses, as well as major case studies that has been done specific to Second Step. Let me see what I can find right here.
If we share the link, Deb, I know they have on there, they have the executive summary of that meta-analysis right on their Second Steps webpage, so we can share that with you. But there's an executive summary there, so you don't
Yeah.
have to read the hundreds of pages
Great.
that go with it. But
Yeah,
Absolutely.
just because, I mean, more high level, I presume other districts are doing this. And
Yes.
how long have they been doing it for even? How new is this?
it's not new. So I can tell you, I was the superintendent in Dartmouth beginning in 2011, and we had Second Steps that had already been in place for quite a few years.
Okay, so we have some good data that we can
It's
kind
been
of
around a
use
long
to
time.
build.
Absolutely. And they actually, on a yearly basis, they update their curriculum to represent any current trends and concepts and skills and so on in terms of their lessons. So it's updated yearly. Some of the statistics that research links evidence-based SEL to positive outcomes. There have been significant gains in student social emotional skills, improved attitudes about self, others, and school, pro-social classroom behavior, an 11 percentile point gain in overall academic achievement, and reduction of conduct issues and reduction in emotional distress.
Thank
And
you.
the meta-analysis for lasting SEL effects from childhood through adulthood was done in 2017. I can send you the link of
Okay,
that.
thank you. My other question was, as you pointed out, in classic public school, public education way, there's a lot of acronyms in here. How are you going to work with families? Because I think it's awesome that you've come here to explain this to us sort of with a district lens. But I think the average family at home will hear MTSS, but I think it's super important that we explain, at the level of each family, exactly what this means in terms of what's happening with their child.
I agree completely. When it comes to a communication plan, it's really important to look at who your audience is.
Right.
And so from an MTSS perspective, as we come together with a district advisory team, again, in order to build a coherent, consistent, sustained system, all stakeholders need to be involved. And so in looking at communication through the lens of who the audience is, you're right. How it is presented to the district school committee looks very different
Right.
than how it would be presented to families, but also how it's presented to staff, faculty and staff. And so that will be some of the work that we will be doing. There's, again, ton of research, a ton of resources out there in terms of building communication plans that utilize layman's language so that everyone can understand. As in the very first slide, in essence, MTSS is giving all kids what they need when they need it in real time. And so that will be part of the work of the district advisory team, as well as our district leadership team when it comes to rolling out the
Yeah,
information.
thank you. I think it's critical, the communication of this. And then my last thing was just a comment, and that is that I feel like over the years that I've had kids in this school and over the years that I've worked with other districts, we constantly hear about all these awesome programs and districts invest in these awesome programs. And as I read this, I'm so impressed by it. And I just urge all of us as a committee, as administration, as a community to stay the course, to be patient, to have faith in the process. I'm sure there will be delays and there will be data that comes back that maybe tells a story we don't like over the course of the years. But I just sort of would urge us as a community to really commit to the process, be patient, and stay the course, because that's how we make meaningful change. So thank you.
Thank you. And again, you're right in that to make transformational, meaningful change typically takes between 3 to 5 years before seeing it fully come to fruition. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you.
Sheila?
Thank you, Dr. DeVios. So I have a couple questions. One is responsive classrooms. Can you just explain what that is for grades K through 5, how long we've been using it, and what does the data show, and how do we use it?
So responsive classroom is not a program, it's an approach. When you hear about morning, it's an instructional approach. So when you hear all of the elementary school teachers doing morning meeting, morning meeting is part of the responsive classroom approach.
So is it like growth, because we used to use growth mindset at Colt Andrews. Do you remember? Is it that, did they replace growth mindset and then add in responsive classroom? Is it a different program?
Nope, they're one and the same.
The one and the same?
One and the same.
Okay.
It's interactive modeling. Responsive classroom aligns to a lot. The approach aligns a lot to our social emotional learning as well. In fact, responsive classroom aligns directly with the second step program, in that a lot of those instructional approaches that teachers are using in responsive classroom are similar to the concepts and explicit teaching skills that the students are getting through second step.
Now, do you know, like, do you have data? Do you guys have conversations about how it's changed? Because I know when we used growth mindset at Colt Andrews, we had a different leader, Kate Wolf, and it changed our culture. But I noticed that once she left, it kind of slid back, because her and a couple of the teachers were really the pioneer of it, and it didn't seem like they had a lot of support. So do you see the culture in all of the elementary schools changing for the positive? Do they like it? Like, do you see less discipline, less issues?
So one of the things that, one of the reasons that I included responsive classroom in current focus areas is because I was not, prior to my role here, was not familiar with responsive classroom, and a few teachers actually from Colt Andrews and also Rockwell, I believe, had inquired about reinforcing and a refresher around responsive classroom, because after that initial training 6 or 7 years ago, however long that was, I think they did one additional kind of refresher or training within the schools. But since then, a lot of turnaround has happened. New teachers have come in, and I think the inclusivity of responsive classroom has diminished. And that's one of the reasons why we're looking at providing some refresher workshops for teachers and kind of bringing some of those approaches back. And again, let me stress that responsive classroom is an instructional approach. It's not a curriculum. It's not a program in itself. It's the power of words, how you speak to children. It's how you model expectations and things like that.
So are you including everyone? Because that was one of the big things that we had at Colt Andrews, was everyone had to do it, like TAs, custodians, secretaries, nurses, like everyone that came in and out of there, because they noticed that teachers that took the training and that trained each other forgot to tell everybody else what they were doing. So there was a huge disconnect. So is it a district-wide that we're investing in making sure everybody's trained in the circle of term, like when people leave, and that it catches up? Or Because that was the biggest thing, I think, for Holt Andrews.
And that is one of the things that we're trying to work through right now in terms of our limitations with professional learning time. In that, for example, each of our PD days this year for grades 3 through 5, they are booked solid with letters training. So we would never be able to use those PD days for any additional training. So now we're left with faculty meetings or volunteer workshops after school or before school and something to that effect. So I think at this point in time, to be realistic, what we'd be looking at is offering some workshops or sessions before school, after school, potentially some pieces during faculty meetings, just as kind of a refresher reminder. However, looking forward to the next year, building in the full professional learning that incorporates the entire staff.
And then just one more question, sorry. So with the data that you're going to be receiving for all, when you evaluate all the outcomes, where does that data go and how does that data get presented, not only to the school committee in the district, but also the parents at large at each school?
That's a great question. And again, that will be part of building those systems and structures. One of the things that, that we'll be looking at is also data platforms that can house all of the different data and then be able to actually show in real time what any gains are. But in the meantime, part of that, our communication plan will be to not only be communicating what is happening, but also how are we progress monitoring, and then also what is the data showing us, both anecdotally as well as quantitatively.
So we're not there yet to figure out how we're going to distribute it district-wise?
No,
parents?
no,
Okay.
not there.
No,
But again,
we can
we'll
say
look,
there is some data that we already have that we'll be looking at. So attendance is an important data point, and you heard that mentioned over and over when Dr. G was talking. So attendance is a data point we already collect.
Okay.
We already collect any of the infractions that are reported in the Aspen Discipline Code. So that's data we can collect. But there's so much more data that we can incorporate when we look at expanding this, really having it in place across the district, which we won't have by the end of this year. We're really, and I think, you know, when we first looked at it, we were like talking about MTSS K-12, but we have since regrouped and said we really need to focus on elementary this year. So then it's how do we collect that data, do our best learning, and then translate that to keep going up the grade levels, adding middle school and then
And I
adding
think the
high
big
school.
key is if you want involvement, you have to have the parents collective.
Right.
You have to have the parents understanding how it affects, because I think that was the biggest buy-in at Holt Andrews to make it all one, where we all had a seminar, we all came in. And I
it's
think,
huge.
you know, there was a huge attendance, like we all came in and like bought into it. I think if you don't explain it to parents and they don't have a chance to be, you know, stakeholders and really kind of collaboratively work together, it's not going to work.
And that's why family engagement is a really important piece to the whole framework.
Well, for anybody,
Great
who's-
points, Mrs. Ellsworth.
I think for anybody who's listening, we have committed to the first 2 years with our ESSER funds. So we haven't just said we'll do it this year and that'll be that. So it gives us a framework to work on for next year. So it's not a bad thing, I think, that we did commit to that long.
Anybody else?
Oh, you know, we only have 2 more meetings as this board, so go ahead.
Do you want her to come up?
Can you just, thank you, it's the only way it gets recorded.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Almeida. I had a couple questions for you. This new approach, has this stemmed from the Rhode Island Department of Education at all?
MTSS?
This is coming from Second Step. Is that the?
So Second Steps is a curriculum, and there are very few social emotional curriculums that are rated green. This is a rated green curriculum by RIDE.
Okay, so it is by right.
Mhm.
Okay. I have 3 more questions. My other question is, since this has not been rolled out to parents yet, so parents are clearly not on board yet with any of this.
And
But-
remember, we said it hasn't even rolled out. Teachers aren't doing it till the end of October at the
Well,
end.
but that's my point. I know
Yeah.
you said elementary, this is being rolled out to elementary on October 23rd, which is next week. But how are you going to communicate this to the families prior to the start of this?
So all of the elementary principals will be including in their newsletters this week a communication that is, it has a letter to parents, a full slide deck presentation for parents, as well as a flyer that explains second step, the benefits. A lot of the information that we talked about a little while ago is all included in that slide deck. Then following that, there'll be weekly communications to families that are explaining what is being, what were the skills that were taught this week and what you can do at home to help support that. So,
Thank you. And then my other question was, you said in the newsletters, they will be either a link or presentation. So we'll have examples of what the teachers may be doing in the classroom with our students. Okay. And lastly, you said this was a pilot program, correct? And we're contracted for 2 years. Is that what it was?
1 year with.
Okay. Oh, but okay.
We just built our plan.
For 2 years. Okay. So after 2 years, after any type of data or anything is researched and compiled, and if it shows little to no effect, will this still be continued because maybe RIDE has suggested it in any way?
So we would need more than 2 years of data. So we would not end something, it's 3 to 5 years is for
Right.
full implementation. We've just committed from our ESSER 3 funds toward this progress for 2 years because that's the cap on the ESSER funds.
Okay.
So this is something we would look to build into our budget over time to support a little bit this next year and then fully in for FY 2025, I have to say, by the time we get to that level. But we only have that ESSER fund through the end of 2024. But we would need to have all curriculum, even we just bought Interreading as our ELA curriculum. You don't get to see the results and outcome of that new curriculum for 3 to 5 years. So in 2 years, we wouldn't say, oh, this isn't working, we're not doing it. That would not be enough time to have a good deep implementation and to gather good data. We would want at a minimum 3 years. I would say 5 years is really a better data point.
Okay,
How
so the
things
plan
are
for this
going.
district as of now is using this approach 3 to 5 years.
Right, remember, this is in line with our strategic plan. Our strategic plan cultural outcomes are tied to MTSS. So the goal would be to at least push through our 5-year plan to look at these outcomes. We
Okay.
have growth measures in place that we would look at to see, are we meeting where we said we would be, seeing improvement over those 5 years.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Davis.
you're welcome. And I think it's important to note too that, ongoing, as we're monitoring the progress on an ongoing basis, we see what's working, what's not working, and we've got a continuous look at how can we make it better, how can we improve, and that can continuously happen over time. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. DiBiase. Superintendent Riley, we were just talking here about the fact that when we start building it into our budget, I don't know if you have figures on how much that is, or is that something we could look for later?
We'll have to look at it, because right now we're just piloting, so we're not looking at a full buy-in, so we have to look at what that cost would be for the curriculum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. D.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The next thing on the agenda is the second reading to approve policy BDG, school attorney. Again, second reading. I need a motion.
So moved.
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The next one is to approve policy JIC, Code of Conduct Policy, second reading.
So moved.
I need a discussion? Yeah, I have discussion. I always have discussion because I don't like this policy.
I, you want me to start?
So I'm not going to vote for it again because I don't think that we should be telling families what to do in a school committee policy. So until that is removed, I'm not going to vote for it.
Do you want me to start?
Do you have something?
I do. So I do have a couple of questions or requests. I know that I had emailed you earlier, the requests. I apologize, I was not at the meeting in September. And it's the same concerns that I had in August when this policy came to us originally. It is a student code of conduct, but I feel that it doesn't center, the expectations are not strong for student expectations. I just request that we establish clear student expectations, such as like demonstrate respect for self and others, demonstrate courtesy to others, behave in responsible manners, things of that nature that actually have clear expectations. And then I understand it's a policy and each school then has the ability to then take it and finesse it so that it's relevant to their building and their age group. But because the parent portion of it is specific, like send your child to school ready to participate and learn, ensure that your child attends school regularly. But to me, a student code of conduct should be student focused and not parent or even staff focused. Because one of the words that was in here was, our core values and beliefs. That's what we're basing our student expectations on. But some people have different core values and beliefs. So to me, it makes more sense. I would feel more comfortable if this policy didn't have any procedure in it, but just had clear expectations of what we expect, because especially at the middle school and the high school level, those kids are responsible for themselves. I mean, I understand, believe me, that they are not, but we're trying to teach them to be. We're trying to teach them that their actions have consequences and that their actions, even when they say stupid things and do stupid things, they're their own. They own them. So I think that we need to make those clear in this policy without going on and on and on.
So I just want to share that all of those expectations are in the student handbooks, and I apologize. In last meeting, we did have the cutout of the handbooks.
Right.
And so the core values and beliefs are created at the school, by the school, with the staff and the students. So for example, when you go through NEASC accreditation, there is a very deep process of digging into what are our core values and beliefs, and that's happened here. And if you look in particularly the high school handbook, you'll see that exact language being used throughout, core values and beliefs. And I think they have, I'm going to forget what the code is that they use for theirs, but I forget. They have a little acronym that goes for their core values and beliefs. But that is widespread and posted throughout the schools. Also, something that's an expectation of all of the schools is that student expectations are posted all over the building. So I always have to think, when we do a policy, who is the intended audience? Students don't look at policy. They look at their student handbooks, which is why we want to be clear about those student expectations in the handbook. But these are here because policy is typically looked at by adults, by parents, by community members. And so we address that parent issue in this. I mean, I just throw that out there as a way of viewing
I
it.
understand what you're saying. I respectfully disagree.
Yep.
Because I think that we're creating a foundation with this policy, and then, because to be honest with you, administrators will come and go. I mean, I've been here for 20 years. 20 plus years. And I can tell you, I actually have a stack of policy books from every school, and there's something different in every one of them. So to me, even though students do not read policy, I think parents read policy. And if it says here, these are the clear expectations that we have for your child, that your child is responsible for, especially at the high school and the middle school level. And these are also at the elementary level. I think that they should be in a student code of conduct policy.
Yes.
So I just, based on, thank you for making the changes that we talked about last,
Mhm.
last meeting. There was just one that was the legal one. It was the statement that says in all matters related to student conduct and discipline, the certified staff assumes the role of parent guardian to the students. I looked, I couldn't find it. I thought we would. No, I printed out the BEP, I went online, I couldn't find it. I thought we were gonna footnote it, because if it's a legal, we should write that it's per law, whatever. If we're reciting that this is Rides and Rhode Island's stance that in all matters related to student conduct and discipline, the certified staff assumes the supervisory role of parent guardian to the students.
When the students are in the school, they're involved in parentis, yes.
Then it should be footnoted in this policy.
Can you send me a citation for that, Mary Ann? We'll put it at the bottom. Anybody else?
All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh, sorry.
The ayes have it. The next thing on the agenda is to approve policy JLIF, suicide prevention, and policy JLIFR, the Rhode Island Model Policy on Suicide Prevention, at the recommendation of the Policy and Curriculum Subcommittee for a first reading.
And I do want to say this did first go to Health and Wellness to review, because all of the experts, so to say, were at that table, our nurses, our social workers. Dr. Caldwell reviewed this with them. This is a new, this is in requirement with the new Nathan Bruno, Jason Platt Act. that
Yeah,
every
I
school
need a
district-
motion to accept and.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
and-
moved.
And
Started explaining
second,
before
and then
your
we can
motion.
have all that discussion. Go for it.
And so you'll see that we also attached all the guidance that goes with it. So although this packet says RIDE model policy, it also includes lots of other resources. So we thought that that would be a good reference document to be attached to the policy. So we'd have both policy JLIF and then JLIFR that would have that document as a reference for anyone who wanted more information on what's required.
My only question on that was, ours a document that requires the school committee to remove. And if the state changes their guidelines, then we have to vote to remove it and vote to put in the new one. If we put it in as an exhibit, we can just change it out.
That's fine. We'll just clean that up. Say exhibit. This is a first read. We'll just change it to exhibit for the next go around.
I think that we found that every couple of years they like to make a change.
You're right.
Okay, thanks.
I have one question.
Yes.
So I have two questions. One is, I was reading through it, what class is the suicide prevention curricula taught? Because it said a couple of things that they teach it within the curricula and then also in health class. So where is Bristol Warren teaching this?
So that's, sorry, go ahead. Sam.
Right now, it's being taught, and suicide prevention is taught in grade 7 and 8 and at the high school, but we don't have a full curriculum that it's being taught from. So this is why we'd like to go with a research-based curriculum.
And it's, we're looking to put it into the health classes, into the science classes?
It's already in the health classes, so what we'd like to do is strengthen it there.
And then my second question, I noticed that here it has PD, staff PD, that is yearly required. And we just heard Dr. D say that we're already quite tight on our PD. So has our district done that PD for this year? What is the plan for that?
So we have to show that we're making progress towards doing that. So we did this summer, we offered to 60 staff members the mental health first aid training prior to the start of school. We did have a full slot of folks participate in that. So we are also looking at different opportunities for professional learning. Dr. Caldwell has done some of this professional development before in her previous district. So her and Dr. Santa will create a plan moving forward so that we can have an annual training for our staff. The mental health first aid is really excellent, and I'd like to provide it to all our staff at least once. However, it is a 6-hour training. So to think that we could manage that on an annual basis when we have so few hours for PD is really not realistic. So I would like to expose everyone to the training at least once and then find an annual training that's maybe more concise as a refresher, and offer the opportunity for mental health first aid for new staff as they come on board.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I
Yes,
had a question. This was a concern that I expressed to the superintendent today, so I thought everybody should hear her answer, not just me. The concern that I expressed was about the line that said the student will be assessed by a district mental health professional to determine readiness to return to school if no letter is provided. And my concern was that there may be circumstances where students are sort of in limbo. They are not able to find them maybe a place for treatment, so there might be a wait. So is it up to our mental health professionals to say, you are ready to come back to school, but what is the alternative is if they're not ready?
And so I wanted to express the fact that readiness is not a yes or no, but it's where on the scale of readiness that a student might be. So this is not something that's new. This is something that happens currently. A student be hospitalized temporarily or be awaiting hospitalization. What is their state of readiness for school? And so we do have resources to be able to either provide a shortened day for a student, to provide perhaps some temporary online learning for a student who might not be able to attend school until they have further treatment. So it's not a yes or no on readiness, it's to what scale is the student ready and how can we create a safety plan for that student so they can be successful at school.
And you do mention in the first line there that work is connected to the school safety plan. So
Correct.
thank you, I appreciated that.
yeah.
My question was on the same line. It just seems like a district mental health professional might not know that particular student's full picture. And I guess I was just, when I was reading it, I was questioning why doesn't it say something about, parents being involved in the conversation or guardians, caregivers, whoever is in that child's life who has a better picture of
Everyone is a part of that reentry meeting.
But it just doesn't say that. That's the only thing. I know it must be that way. And then it even goes on to say the school's role of and loco parentis requires that the health and safety is given consideration, which is great, except that I personally would like us to just maybe consider adding that in there so that it's clear that this is not just going to be a blanket determination by someone who might not have the full picture, if that makes sense. No. Dr. Caldwell has something.
Yes, exactly.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I would just suggest is that many times when students are returning, if a school-based mental health provider has determined the student to be at risk for hurting themselves or someone else, that's a clinical judgment that they are making. That doesn't mean that they won't certainly talk with the family, but the ultimate decision around a readiness to return, if a student has not, for instance, seen a provider, a student may not have gone to an ED or seen some other provider outside of school, will be based on the clinical judgment of that particular school-based mental health provider. I don't want you to think that there will be no discussion with the family, but that person has to gather all of the information to make an informed clinical judgment about whether or not that student is safe to be in school, both for himself and for his or her peers.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify too, that those clinicians are certified personnel that are not, they're not social workers, but they've had additional training and additional certification. And when you're at the table, it's not just that person, but other staff that's familiar with the students. Am I correct?
So school social workers by license are licensed by the Department of Health.
Yes.
So they can actually practice in private practice as LICSWs or LCSWs. School psychologists are credentialed through the Rhode Island Department of Education, and their training is also in the ability to assess students who are at risk and who may need further intervention. So it would be those two particular roles within our schools.
So could it be, could we stick a qualified district mental health professional in there? Could we just
Can we pop qualified in to cover those two clinicians?
Where would you be recommending that go, please?
The student will be assessed by a qualified district mental health professional to determine readiness. Just to make it
Or certified?
crystal clear.
Certified.
Certified, qualified.
Sure. I like that idea as well.
We can amend it to say that, can't we?
We just did.
Anything else? All right. Hearing none, all in favor with the small changes that we asked?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The next policy is approved policy JLCD, medical marijuana administration in schools, and JLCDR, procedure for administration of medication to students at the recommendation of the Policy and Curriculum Subcommittee for a first reading.
So moved.
I need a second. Discussion.
And again, this went to the Health and Wellness Committee ahead of coming to this. This was initially drafted by our attorney, and then any feedback you see, which really I think is just including the words Bristol Warren, and then what you see added to number 13 is what came from the committee. And again, I'm sure Dr. Call will be happy to answer these questions, and she led that discussion.
I just wanted to include.
Nikki,
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to include at wellness, we did invite a lot of stakeholders to participate, weigh in, and we had a great discussion about this. Thank you.
thanks.
At policy and at the policy subcommittee meeting, I did express that my only problem with it is that I don't believe that we need JLCD, because I believe it is because prescription medical marijuana is already covered under administration of medication to students. That's my only piece of feedback.
So why did we,
Because I think the state,
the state was required by Rhode Island Department of Education, who asked us to put a medical marijuana policy in place. So you need to have two.
They
You need
required
have
us to be separate?
We needed to do it. No, but what, if it's covered under the medical, because it's the medical students, why would we get two, why would we take two? Why wouldn't that just cover under this if it's prescribed?
because RIDE says it doesn't matter what you cover, you're going to have a medical marijuana policy.
Okay.
So is it duplicating something else? Yeah, Nikki's absolutely correct, but,
Yep, that's all.
all right. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You're opposed?
No, I voted yes. Yes, sorry.
No, I just saw a hand up. I
Oh,
thought-
no.
You voted yes on the last one too, right, Karen?
All right, the next item on the agenda is to approve the virtual instruction day program.
So, I'm sorry.
No, I'm looking at you. I need a motion.
So moved.
A second. Discussion.
Thank you. So as you know, last year, RIDE began allowing us to offer virtual instruction instead of having a foul weather day. I won't say snow because it could be anything. It could be a hurricane, could be some other reason why we would have to shut down, perhaps the flooding out of the street, all of the things that happen that we can't control. But they added some new criteria, some more stringent requirements to what has to be offered during that day. So Dr. Santa has put this together for us and connected with all of our stakeholders, shared this with our admin team, with the union leadership to make sure we're meeting all the requirements of RIDE. And then the last requirement of RIDE is also that the school committee vote to approve it. So remember, this is not for PD days. We've already agreed we won't do any virtual learning on, but this would be instead of a snow day being made up on June 19th, which would be our date where we would start makeup days, we would do this instead. And we can only have a maximum of 4 of these.
Okay, I was just going to ask that. Great.
Discussion, anybody? I'm kind of liking the idea of snow days, but
So remember that we're required to do 3 hours of in-person learning? 3 hours of live synchronous learning for the day, most of which typically happens in the morning. Sometimes at the older grades, that may be a little more spread out during the day.
So they can go out
There's still plenty of
afterwards.
time for
Yeah.
kids to play outside on a snow day. Because the learning, and I will, all the research says virtual learning is not the best method of learning. However, I would say to you that this virtual day plan will provide more instruction than a school day on June 19th.
No, I don't disagree with you.
I just throw that out there. By the time you get to June 19th, I'm not sure if we're even going to get 3 hours of good learning. So I think this is actually a benefit and will allow us to, recap. Maybe teachers can touch base with students. If there's a test coming up, the review can still happen. All of the things that we would do in a abbreviated version online will still benefit the students in real time as we're learning.
Well, I also think that what goes on at home is at the parent's discretion. So having said that, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
The next thing in the agenda is to approve and seal the minutes of the executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Before we do that, we have to announce that we took a vote in executive session on the security plans. We have security plans for our district that are required to be filed at RIDE by November 1st.
Yes.
So we took a vote to approve ours and send them up to the state. And that was the only vote we took in executive session. So having said that, any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The last thing on our agenda is kind of special. And that's to approve the Council 94 contract.
So moved.
Discussion. I would go right ahead.
I am thrilled that we have finally got a contract for Council 94. We worked very hard on it, and they deserve whatever is in this contract. And I've talked to a few of the people, and they're very pleased with the contract that we're giving them. So that,
I'd just like to thank the members of the committee who worked on that contract. I know that it wasn't easy, but I think it's a good contract, and I'm excited about it. So moving on, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. All right, before we adjourn, one bit of housekeeping. We have one more regularly scheduled meeting as this board of the school committee, and that will be on November 14th. The new board will meet for the first time on the last Monday in November, the 28th, for an organizational meeting. So you will see us one more time. So thank you very much for coming, and I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
There's no discussion on that, so all in favor?
aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much.